Just
like
see
Jason
who the
does.
hosts were. We voted.
Okay, so this is the distribution team demo. It is now the time that it is scheduled to start. So if you are late, we will not wait. For those of you who are not looking at the demo notes, I'm going to today demo deploying Praefect into Kubernetes. The details are all in there. There's a link to the issue. I have a few scenarios I want to poke around with. I want to test deploying, make sure it works when other people are watching, which isn't always a guarantee. I just wanted to kind of poke around a little, see what we can do. I want to test scaling up Gitly replicas. I have never done this, and I want to test scaling down Gitly replicas. Again, I have not done that. And then I want to try just kind of killing pods and see how Praefect handles that in this scenario, because I have not tested that at all as well. So we'll give this a shot. So I will start by sharing my screen. So as the MR currently stands, right now, the only thing you need to do to enable Praefect is set these values, just the global Praefect enabled to true. It will default to 3 replicas. So I'll deploy that now. So while we wait, for those who aren't aware, Praefect is sort of like the, I guess the high availability coordinator for Gitly. So each Gitly node will be a replica of the other one. They all have their own PV, but they will then, Praefect will ensure that all the data gets replicated between all of them. And so the application will talk directly to Praefect, and Praefect will then in turn talk to Gitly. So it's sort of like a go-between in there, and it keeps track of who it's supposed to talk to and who it isn't supposed to talk to. Yep, I have the wrong branch checked out. Let's try that again. So this is a improvement I need to make to my rake task, is where I should specify what branch I want it to actually deploy, not just whatever I happen to have checked out in my dev directory. But I think they should work. Let's see.
Hey, Ian, I'm curious, in production, do you know how long they've been running the Prefect stuff or anything about how they're running it?
I do not.
Gotcha. Curious if anybody on the team does.
We don't have a huge amount of detail about exactly how they're running it. We could probably poke them to get more details. I am fairly certain they're not running it for all repositories at this point.
But they've been kind of slow rolling it as they gain confidence, I guess.
There's a matter of gaining confidence, understanding the actual application performance metrics, how it actually behaves under load, the database impact, the monitoring impact, etc. So we can't just like roll the fleet into it, because in reality, you're going from a Gitly instance to 2 or more Gitly instances with 2 or more Praefect in front, with 2 or more databases in between. So the infrastructure is massive if you just kind of flip it on for everything.
Gotcha. That's the kind of context I was interested in.
So Praefect does have its own database. We're just running on the same database instance that we deploy by default in the chart. And so the job is there to create the user, the database user, and the database itself. Yep. Okay. So we don't have all the web services running. I did recently add a break task to automatically disable signups, but I need to add another task to wait for the deploy to be ready before it can work. All right, first thing to do is make sure we can create a project. Or actually, first thing to do is make sure we have Gitly servers, and we do, and it is talking to the Praefect node, and it is showing version and Git version, so that should be good. And we're seeing some data there in the prefect node, Praefect. And I can commit changes, so Git functionality seems to be working. So let's just try. All right, so creating and deleting files works. I will add one more file just so we have a file to work with when we're poking around with things. All right, so deploy went well once we got past the user error. So you'll see now we've got 3 Gitly pods, the Praefect pod, and if we go to stateful sets, we've just got the one Gitly stateful set, but looking for 3 pods, and I got the GitLab Praefect. Let's see what else is relevant. We do have one GitLab config map. I do need to play around with it at some point in time. It would be interesting to see if we can do individual GitLab configurations. I don't know how useful that will actually be, but it would be something interesting. The Praefect config is very similar to the GitLab config, which can be frustrating when you're debugging why it's not working, and it turns out it picked up the GitLab config. But other than that, it's fine, and it's pretty standard. We are using the ERB, we've got the database settings, and we've got the virtual storage settings. Check out, there is a few operations we can do with Praefect if you drop into a shell. Yeah, so there are database migrations, so we can check the state of those, and those are all applied, so that is good. We do have the startup script for Praefect, just runs the migrate on every start. It's an idempotent operation, so it's not a heavy cost to make sure all the migrations are started every time. We can run SQL ping, make sure it talks to the database. That's good. If they weren't working, we just run SQL migrate there, and it would have migrated everything. And then we can run dial nodes to check each of the node it can talk to. It checks that it can talk to them. It can check their consistency, and that everything is good. So everything is happy there. And then if it wasn't, we could run reconcile, or we could accept data loss. I haven't played around with those, so I'm not sure the full implications of doing that yet. But since everything is happy, I'm assuming those will be a no up at this point in time. Before we move on, anything anybody wants to check? Crickets 3. I'm going to now scale up. Let's add 5, and I want to see if this automatically adds them. I don't know what it will do. We'll see.
Okay, a hiccup here is, are we just updating the config map contents for Praefect? Like,
No, it should be updating the
replacing
stateful set for
GitLab.
GitLab as well.
Okay, yeah. So what I'm saying is, will the Praefect chart actually need to be restarted? Because
Yeah,
all we're doing
the
is
pod
setting
will
the
need to be
config.
restarted, but I'm not 100% sure that's going to happen. I don't think I've done anything to make that happen. But if that's the case, then I'll just kill it and let it restart and then see what happens from there. Like, I'm just curious as to whether Praefect will do the right thing and see 2 new pods and automatically replicate to them, or what. So I'm more interested in the Praefect functionality than the chart functionality at this time, if that makes sense.
So my concern is, if we're using a projected volume for the configuration map, it should be known that you will not get config map updates on when we're using projected volumes. Second, if we're using it in an ERB format, then it won't ever be triggered to regenerate into the place at which Praefect could even notice that there is a config map change. So we may have to forcibly restart the container.
Well, it's restarting right now.
Now, part of that should be because we're using the config map checksum patterns. So we have that. I just want to call out that we don't have the ability to actually just automatically trigger a config map update through like user 2.
I'm not really sure why the second Ghibli pod restarted. All right, existing Ghibli pods are restarting. Should have checked the primary, but I still have time. So we are seeing some failover in here. Should be healthy now. Doesn't look like we're getting any more errors. Not expected to restart all of the Ghibli pods, so we'll want to check into that. But everything is consistent, and so it did replicate to the two new pods that we added to the cluster. It looks like we can confirm this manually. All right, I disagree with that assessment. That's what I expect to see. All right. So it looks like it does need to be manually reconciled at this point in time. So we'll need to factor that in. Drop this down to 3 again and see what happens. Looks like it's typing to. I'm guessing the GitLab repository is starting because we're changing the storage design in the config map. So their config map is changing and that's causing the pods to restart. So it should be up. We have seen it. What's the word I'm thinking of? We have seen it fail over while we've been doing the upgrades. One thing that occurred to me now that would have been cool to test would have been to see what happens if we tried to fail over it to one of the newer pods after we had scaled up that had been reconciled, and seeing what would have happened then. But we are running out of time, so I don't know that I would have time to scale back up and see what happens there. Does anybody have anything they want to take a look at while we're here and this is up and running? Crickets.
Ian, you mentioned upgrades, and it's obviously don't have time right now to do it, but I'm curious, the heavy path on just upgrading the Prefect surface itself, is that relatively straightforward, or is there anything interesting worth calling out?
As still early on in Prefect's life to really check, but it should just be a matter of starting a new pod with the new version of Prefect and running the SQL migrations. Is that what you're referring to, the upgraded Prefect itself?
Yeah. The Prefect service itself, we know will be changing over time, and I'm just curious, so far it sounds like you've stepped through it, and it sort of follows the similar model as the other services. At
Yep,
least in
so
this
far
environment.
it does look like that'll be the case. We'll have to kind of, it's still early in this life, so we'll have to play that by ear and see what happens when breaking changes come in.
Sounds good.
Anybody else? Crickets 1, Crickets 2, Crickets 3. Well, thanks everybody for playing along, and have a good day.